And it looks like my clicker doesn't work again, so... No, apparently it does. So developments over the past week. Well, I guess we've been harping on quite a lot about this curve. And the curve is getting flatter. You can see in the area there with the yellow, I've put a big circle around it, that it's flatter. And I've put a series of numbers there which you can read for yourselves that show that our numbers are going up. And in South Australia this week, we had several days with one person, which is brilliant. But the question is, does that tell the whole story? And that's, I guess, what we've got to go through today and what we've got to keep in mind over the coming weeks. First thing to look at is that flat enough? Well, just pulling out a couple of cases for comparison, we've got Italy and UK, which have a bit over double our population, and you can see their curve versus our curve. And remember, they've got double the population, so double the hospital capacity. And there's not a huge amount of gap between their curve and our curve. So we need to have this curve quite flat if we don't want the same thing to happen to us as has happened there. And we keep talking about it. What is all this flattening of a curve? And I've got another curve here, which is a sort of weird curve. And what are we really trying to say? And in future little segments, I'll probably try to go into R values a little bit, but they're a bit more complicated again. Let's keep it simple on that today. And I guess what I'm wanting to say today is, really it's as simple as this. If each person who has the virus gives it to 2 people, then the number of people who are sick with this virus goes up exponentially. So 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, I can't do more than that. If each person gives less than 1 person the virus, then this slowly dies out. So this fancy graph on the left here is a computer modelling of the different options over the last 7 days and looking at forward projections. That's too complicated for me. It's as simple as this. If you get the virus and you don't give it to anyone else, then your part in it stops. If you get the virus and you give it to 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 20 other people, then your part in the story continues. So that's really what we're looking at. And we heard a little bit about it earlier, but what is our end game? And the end game for this, there are 3. One is that we get a vaccine. Now, bearing in mind there's never been a vaccine to the coronavirus, the common cold virus. The second end game is that 60% of the community catch this. And whether that's over the short term or whether that's over the long term, and does that actually confer immunity that stays there or not, are all questions we can't answer yet. And the third end game will be having some sort of simple and reliable treatment. Now, none of those end games are something that are available anytime soon, which I guess brings us to our next bit. There's a lot of question about when can we relax on this? When can we start, as a church fellowship, when can we start getting together here again? Well, I actually can't answer that question, just like Scott Morrison can't answer the question for Australia, and every government across the world is having the same sort of discussion. We've got 4 points for you. So at the moment, we actually aren't testing everybody. At the moment in South Australia, unless you're a medical worker, so if you're in the health workforce, then you can be tested with any sort of viral symptoms. But other than that, you're only being tested if you have some sort of epidemiological association, so that's some sort of contact association with somebody else who's sick. So we're not actually picking up very well yet. How much community spread do we have? We hope it's low, but hoping it's low is different to knowing it's low. And I'll come back to that a little bit just at the end of this slide. And if we're trying to judge this by hospital admissions, then that's also a bit dangerous. And that's because the average time from the first time you're exposed to this to the first time you show symptoms is 5 days. And generally the time it takes from you showing symptoms, however mild they may be, if you get sick enough to need hospital, that's generally 8 days after you get sick. So we're looking at about a 2-week period between you getting the infection, or being exposed to that infection, and knowing that you've got it if it has to wait till you end up in hospital. And so with all of the things we're doing, there's this big lag time between you actually getting exposed and us being able to tell if that's the system we have. So coming back to the top, when can we relax? Well, we can't relax until we either get a much, much bigger ability to test, which is coming, they're trying very hard, or until we can very clearly see from the hospitals that we're not seeing community spread. So this isn't something we can relax on. And as a government, our government can't afford to relax on this. When China's relaxed this a little bit, Singapore thought about relaxing and now just clamped down again a little bit harder, because as soon as you relax, people go back to spreading things. So we've got to be very careful, and we have to be aware that we're in this for a while. So what is the plan? Well, currently the plan is a bit simple, which I like simple. The plan is that we need to stay away from each other. The plan is that we need to make sure that if we cough or if we touch our face, that we're keeping it clean. And the last bit of the plan is that you need to stay home unless you really must go out. And I think anyone on Facebook's seen a whole series of different little flow charts asking you question after question about really, really, really must you go out? And that's really what we're looking at when we're looking at this. In South Australia, we aren't at the two-person rule yet. That's currently a federal recommendation, but not something the SA government or the SA police are enforcing. So you actually can still have up to 10 people, but you still need to be very, very careful. Those 10 people still have to have 4 square metres each, and it still is better if you don't have your Easter party. So really what we're looking at is we're still looking at every time you get together with somebody, there is the risk that you're sick and not knowing it, and that your story I mentioned earlier is continuing because you're giving it to 1, 2, 5, 10, however many other people. And the very last slide, and Darren's tip, is we're talking a lot about flattening curves. Well, there's one curve we actually don't want to flatten, and that is the curve about how spiritual we're being. And really what we're looking at here, and I've picked a tree planted by the water as the picture there, because what we're looking at is that if we continue to grow spiritually through this, then at the other end of this process, we've grown, we've learnt something, and hopefully there's another tree growing next to that tree that's your tree at the end of this. So 1 Thessalonians, therefore comfort each other and edify one another, just as you also are doing. So for everyone who's part of the Rival Fellowship, I'd like to keep encouraging you that we will get through this, and if we can keep doing what we're doing and looking to God to guide us, then we'll get through it a lot simpler and a lot smoother. And if you're listening to this and you're not part of our fellowship and you'd like to know more, then please follow us to the website and you'll be able to find out more. Thank you very much.